June 12, 1944. Dawn crept over the RAF airfield at Ford like a pale, uncertain breath, pushing thin strands of mist across the runways and revealing rows of Spitfires and Typhoons lined like half-awake sentinels waiting for another day of war. In Dispersal Hut No. 4, 19-year-old pilot officer Henry Hal Carraway sat on a wooden bench that creaked under his jittering leg. His flying gloves were tucked under one arm, his helmet strap dangling like a loose thought he hadn't yet decided to finish. Today was his first operational mission. No instructor behind him, no safety net, no second chance. Just him, his aircraft, and whatever waited above the Normandy coastline. Outside, mechanics moved with practiced speed around his Typhoon, Blue 2, checking cowling latches and torque settings, running their cold hands along the wings to feel for imperfections. The morning smelled of aviation fuel, damp grass, and the faint tang of cordite drifting in from the channel. Hal tried to steady his breathing. He wasn't a coward, he kept reminding himself of that, but he had never known fear could feel so physical, like a knot in the spine, a tightening across the ribs, a heartbeat that wouldn't obey orders. Squadron leader Davies strode in with a clipboard, his voice rough from cigarettes and too many dawn briefings. "All right, lads, listen." The group of pilots straightened. "Target is a German convoy moving south of Caen. Armoured cars, troop carriers, maybe a flak half-track or two. You'll depart in pairs. Remember, eyes open. The Jerrys are desperate, which means they're bold. Expect ground fire, expect ambushes. Expect the unexpected." Hal swallowed hard. Expect the unexpected. What did that even mean? Davies continued. "Carraway, you're Blue 2. You stay on Lieutenant Spaulding's wing. You don't break formation unless ordered. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Hal replied, though his voice barely rose above a whisper. Spaulding gave him a quick grin. "Stick to me and you'll be fine. First mission's always the worst. After that, you're too tired to be scared." Hal tried to smile back, but his jaw refused to unclench. Minutes later, he walked across the tarmac toward his Typhoon. Each step sounded too loud in his ears, like he was walking into a cathedral where silence had weight. The ground crew chief nodded to him, an older man with oil-black hands and eyes that had seen too many pilots climb into planes and not return. He patted the fuselage gently. "She'll get you home if you treat her right." Hal climbed the wing route, settled into the cockpit, and felt the cold leather seat embrace him. The canopy frame curved above his head, like the ribs of some metal beast. He inhaled once, twice, and switched on the battery. Dials flickered alive. When he pressed the starter, the engine coughed, sputtered, then erupted into life with a rumbling snarl that vibrated through his bones. The vibration calmed him. Machines made sense. Machines were predictable. War, people, were not. Taxiing out, he followed Spaulding's aircraft, the tailwheel bouncing lightly over the uneven ground. The sun had just begun to break through the haze when the two Typhoons reached the runway threshold. Tower clearance crackled in their headsets. Spaulding's voice followed. "Blue section, rolling." Hal shoved the throttle forward. The aircraft surged. The runway blurred. The tail lifted. His heart hammered. Then, wheels up. The ground dropped away. England peeled into distance behind him, replaced by the glittering band of the Channel stretching toward the smoke-stained horizon of Normandy. At 8,000 feet, the wind whistled around the canopy. Spaulding signalled for a climb. Hal followed, focusing intensely on keeping formation, wings level, distance steady, movement smooth. He couldn't shake the awareness that if he drifted too far out, he was alone, visible, vulnerable, a single speck in an endless sky. They crossed the coastline near Courseulles-sur-Mer. Below, thin lines of smoke curled from farmhouses shattered in the fighting. The beaches still bore the scars of D-Day, burnt-out landing craft, scattered wreckage, trenches carved into the sand. Further inland, the countryside was a patchwork of fields churned by tank treads and artillery blasts. "Convoy should be near the road junction," Spaulding said. "Stay sharp." Hal scanned the landscape, eyes darting from hedgerows to tree lines. He spotted it first, a column of vehicles half hidden between orchards and barns, Trucks camouflaged under branches, motorcycles weaving between them, and yes, flak guns. "Contact! 12 o'clock low," he called out before he could doubt himself. "Good eyes," Spaulding answered. "Blue section, diving attack. Follow me in." Hal prepared for the dive. He pushed his nose down, but too gently, the Typhoon barely dipped. Panic twinged. He pushed harder. Still not enough. In training, he had practiced bombing runs on stationary targets. This was different. Real flak. Real movement, real death waiting below. Spaulding vanished beneath him, diving sharply. Hal hesitated a fraction too long. When he corrected, he came in off angle, steeper and faster than intended. The wind screamed. The horizon tilted violently. His stomach lurched. Black puffs of flak burst around him like smudges tearing open the sky. A shard of metal clanged off his left wing root. Another burst rocked the aircraft. Hal gritted his teeth, lined up a half track, and pressed the firing button. The Typhoon's cannons erupted, 4 streams of fire hammering downward. Tracer rounds tore into the vehicles, explosions flashing beneath him, but Hal wasn't controlling the dive anymore. He was falling. He yanked the stick back, too hard. The Typhoon jolted, stalled, then shuddered violently as it clawed for lift. Alarms wailed. The trees rushed up toward him in a blur of green and brown. Hal gasped, pulled again. The aircraft groaned, but the nose finally rose, just enough to clear the treetops by what felt like inches. He shot out over a field, heart pounding so hard he could hear it. "Blue 2, what happened? You overshot!" Spaulding shouted. I'm all right," Hal stammered, positioning to rejoin. But he wasn't all right. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. He had nearly killed himself on his first mission. Worse, his erratic dive had thrown the formation off. The flak crews were adjusting, the convoy scattering, and Spaulding was now under concentrated fire. Hal felt something shift inside him. Not courage, not clarity, but a sudden, fierce refusal to panic again. He banked left, climbing. And then, unexpectedly, he saw something. The way the flak bursts were tracking Spaulding's predictable flight path, forming a deadly box around him. If Hal could break that pattern, distract the gunners, pull their fire away, it might save Spaulding and give the other pilots a clean run. But the maneuver forming in Hal's mind was reckless, untrained, and absolutely not in the manual. Yet something told him it might work, and once the idea took shape, it wouldn't let go. Hal levelled out at 4,000 feet, the Typhoon's engine thrumming with a steady, urgent growl. His gloves were slick with sweat. His breath came in fast, uneven bursts. Below him, the German convoy scattered into the hedgerows like insects fleeing sunlight. But the flak crews were focused, almost gleefully, on Spaulding's clean, predictable arc as he prepared his second attack run. "Blue 2, stay on me," Spaulding ordered through clenched teeth. "We're going again. Keep your distance this time." Hal didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the rhythm of the flak bursts, the way they bloomed in angular patterns around Spaulding. German gunners were trained to anticipate stable British attack angles. They drew triangles in the sky, mathematical, ruthless. Anyone flying within that invisible geometry was hammered. But what if you flew outside the geometry? What if you became the unpredictable element? Hal wasn't thinking like a pilot anymore. He was thinking like someone who had just survived by sheer, panicked instinct and had glimpsed something the manuals had never mentioned. He dropped the Typhoon's nose. Instead of committing to a steady dive, he rolled the aircraft sharply left, then right, then left again, violent, jagged movements that made the horizon buck and spin. The airframe groaned, his stomach twisted, his head slammed against the padded rest. But the flak gunners below suddenly broke formation. They didn't know what he was doing. Nobody knew what he was doing, not even Hal. "Blue 2, what the hell are you?" Spaulding's voice cut off as a flak burst detonated behind him instead of ahead. Hal didn't answer. He forced the Typhoon into a snapping zigzag descent, an unpredictable, off-angle, off-rhythm plunge that cut across the convoy at a slant the Germans weren't trained to counter. Below, the gunners panicked, their barrels jerked wildly, tracking the wrong aircraft, the wrong angle, the wrong threat. Hal felt the shift like a pressure easing in the air. Spaulding was suddenly flying clean. "Caraway, you mad idiot! Keep doing that," Spaulding breathed. Hal tore across the treetops, levelling out at barely 150 feet. His wings skimmed so close to the hedgerows he clipped leaves that spun into his slipstream. He weaved hard right and fired a burst into an armoured car, the tracers stitching across its hood. Smoke bloomed. Another vehicle swerved off the road in blind reaction. Then Hal climbed sharply, too sharply, and the Typhoon's engine coughed. He eased the throttle, gasping. His lungs burned, his arms felt like lead. But the madness worked. Every German gun was pointed upward at him, because nobody in their right mind flew like this. "Blue 2, brake left," Spaulding shouted suddenly. Hal obeyed without hesitation. A stream of heavy rounds tore through the air where he had been a heartbeat earlier. A hidden 20mm flak gun in a barnyard had just opened up. Hal's dive pattern had drawn them all out. "Blue leader, taking the shot," Spaulding said. Hal banked out as Spaulding streaked down in a clean line, cannons blazing. The barn exploded in a geyser of dust and timber as the flak gun dissolved under the barrage. "Nice work, Blue 2, Spaulding said. "Let's finish the run." Hal reformed behind Spaulding, but something had changed inside him. The shaking had stopped. The fear had settled into something colder, clearer. He wasn't flying perfectly, he knew that. But he was flying with intent now. He understood instinctively something older pilots hadn't taught him. Predictability kills. Unpredictability survives. 2 more Typhoons from another section joined the attack. Hal's strange, jagged approach had confused the gunners so thoroughly that the sky felt open, dangerous, yes, but survivable. As they climbed after the second run, Hal looked down and saw the convoy in ruins, smoking trucks, abandoned motorcycles, half-tracks burning like overturned lanterns. German troops ran for cover, stumbling through fields, some dropping their rifles entirely. But Hal didn't feel triumph. He felt numb. Then Spaulding's voice came back, steadier now. "Caraway, you still with me?" "Yes," Hal said, though he still tasted metal in his mouth from clenching his teeth. "Good, because we're not done. Command wants us to check a crossroads a mile east, possible reinforcements." Hal followed him in silence as they climbed to 8,000 feet, circling above the drifting smoke. The channel wind buffeted them again, cold and familiar. Hal's heartbeat slowed. The Typhoon felt like an extension of his own breath now, still terrifying, but alive with possibility. They reached the crossroads to find nothing but wrecked farmhouses and a smouldering staff car. A few scattered German troops fled into orchards as soon as they sighted the Typhoons. "Looks clear," Spaulding said. "We'll sweep once more then, RTB." Hal acknowledged. His hands were steadier, his breathing calmer. But beneath it all was a realization that made his stomach twist again. He had just created something new, something not taught, not briefed, not sanctioned. He had flown an irregular assault dive, a pattern so chaotic it disrupted German tracking systems built on decades of Luftwaffe doctrine. He didn't know it yet, not fully, but what he had done would be analyzed, copied, and eventually adopted as a new combat tactic. Erratic low-altitude aggression to break enemy anticipatory flak patterns. At that moment, he only knew one thing. He was still alive, and the mission wasn't over. As they turned back toward the coastline, the air suddenly vibrated with static. "Blue section, be advised. Enemy fighters airborne. Unknown number." Hal's throat tightened again. His first mission was about to get even more dangerous. Hal scanned the sky instinctively, his heart tightening like a fist. The clouds above them were thin, streaked by the rising heat from burning vehicles below. Spaulding's voice returned, clipped and urgent. "Blue 2, tighten up. Unknown fighters usually means bad news." Hal eased his Typhoon closer, wings steady, eyes searching the blue-grey horizon. Then he saw them. 3 dark specks gliding out of the sun, descending fast, their silhouettes unmistakably angular. "Focke-Wulfs," Hal whispered. "3 of them," Spaulding confirmed. "They've got the altitude advantage. Keep moving. Don't climb. Typhoons can't outturn them at height." Hal swallowed hard. His first mission, and now he was going into a dogfight with pilots better trained, better experienced, and eager to exploit a rookie mistake. The FW-190s dove sharply, their engines howling as they swept toward the Typhoons. Hal broke right, Spaulding left, splitting the German formation for a moment. Tracer rounds clawed past Hal's canopy as he rolled violently. His stomach lurched. Sweat flew from his eyebrows. Spaulding's voice cut in sharply. "Don't go vertical. Stay low. Stay fast." Hal pushed the stick forward, dropping to treetop height. Branches blurred beneath him. He felt his aircraft skim the air as though brushing the world's surface. The Focke-Wulf behind him adjusted, diving after him. But at this altitude, its advantage shrank. Hal's mind raced. He couldn't fight conventionally. He wasn't trained enough, and they'd expect standard evasive patterns. They'd expect predictable loops, predictable banks, but predictability had already nearly killed him once today. So he did what had saved him before. He broke the pattern. He threw the Typhoon into another jagged, irregular flight path. A brutal, unpredictable series of snap turns, shallow dips, rolling weaves, and erratic bursts of throttle that made the aircraft shudder dangerously, but kept him out of the Germans' gun sights. The tree line blurred as he darted between blasts of flak and his own wake turbulence. The German pilot hesitated, too uncertain to commit to a firing angle that made no sense. Hal cut across a farmyard, yanking the stick back at the last second to clear a windmill by only a few meters. The Focke-Wulf broke off to avoid crashing. Hal shot upward through its blind angle. Spaulding saw the opening. "Blue 2, bring him toward me." Hal angled sharply, his movements still unpredictable. The German pilot regained position, diving behind Hal again, but just as he aligned his sight, Spaulding raked him from the side. Cannon fire tore into the German's fuselage. The Focke-Wulf burst into flame, spiraling down in a trail of black smoke. "One down," Spaulding shouted, but the victory was short-lived. The second Focke-Wulf came screaming in from Hal's left. Hal barely had time to roll before the sky around him erupted with tracer fire. He dove, nose cutting through the air, the engine roaring at the edge of safe limits. The Germans stayed behind him, relentless. Hal's eyes narrowed. Okay, so the irregular pattern worked, but he needed more. Something bolder. Something insane. He yanked back slightly, not enough to stall, and then chopped the throttle hard. The Typhoon jerked, slowed sharply, and the German overshot him by surprise. It wasn't a taught maneuver. It wasn't in the manual. It wasn't even logical. But Hal's instinct screamed now with clarity he didn't understand. As the Focke-Wulf passed overhead, Hal shoved the throttle forward again, climbing directly underneath its belly. He was so close he could see the rivets under the wings. He fired a burst that stitched through its underside. The German fighter jolted, rolled, and began trailing smoke. Spaulding finished it with a swift, clean attack that sent it crashing into a hedgerow. "Good God, Caraway," Spaulding breathed. "If you survive this war, you'll either be a legend or a cautionary tale." "Still got one more," Hal replied, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. The third Focke-Wulf was smart. He didn't dive recklessly. Instead, he circled, assessing, waiting for Hal to make a mistake. Hal steadied himself. His whole body buzzed with adrenaline. His mouth felt dry as dust. "Blue 2, Spaulding said quietly. "Do not go head-on with him." Hal didn't answer. He was studying the German pilot's pattern, precise, controlled. "Expecting a disciplined British counter." Hal took a breath, felt something settle inside him, and once more abandoned the doctrine. He rolled left. The FW-190 adjusted. Then Hal rolled right. The German matched again. Then Hal abruptly threw his aircraft into a seemingly purposeless shallow climb. Then dive. Then half-turn. Then climb. Then dive again, in a rhythm so uneven it looked like the aircraft was malfunctioning. The German hesitated. That hesitation saved Hal's life. He swung sharply upward, cannon fire ripping across the Focke-Wulf's right wing. The enemy plane erupted into a blossom of flame. "Caraway!" Spaulding shouted with stunned relief. "That's all three! Form up! We're heading home before your luck runs out!" Hal tried to laugh, but only a shaky breath came out. The flight back across the channel felt longer than the entire mission. His arms ached. His back burned. His hands trembled each time he relaxed them. But the Typhoon's engine droned steadily, faithfully, like it too was exhausted, but proud. As the coastline of England grew larger, Hal felt something warm spread through his chest. Relief, disbelief, and a quiet, dawning understanding. He had survived his first mission. He had destroyed ground targets, disrupted German flak, saved his flight leader's life, and helped down 3 enemy fighters. But more than that, he had stumbled into a new way of flying, a way defined by unpredictability, erratic movement, irregular assault patterns that broke enemy tracking assumptions, a way that later RAF reports would call disruptive low-altitude maneuvering, but pilots would simply nickname Caraway Chaos. When Hal landed, the wheels kissed the runway with a trembling squeal. Mechanics ran toward the aircraft. Spaulding dismounted first, ripping off his helmet. "Caraway!" he barked. Hal's knees almost gave out as he climbed down. He expected a reprimand, maybe even grounding. Instead, Spaulding grabbed him by the shoulders. "What you did wasn't textbook, but it damn well saved the mission." Hal blinked. I wasn't thinking. You thought like someone who wanted to stay alive. And that," Spaulding said, voice softer now, "is something you can't teach." Word spread across the squadron within hours. Some called Hal reckless. Others called him brilliant. Intelligence officers interviewed him, asking him to sketch the movement patterns he used, though he could barely describe them. By nightfall, one thing was clear. A 19-year-old rookie on his first mission had accidentally invented a tactic that seasoned pilots hadn't dared to try. And it had worked. That night, Hal lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, the echoes of cannon fire and flak still ringing in his ears. He felt no pride yet, only exhaustion, relief, and the faint trembling of someone who had touched death and pulled their hand back just in time. But deep down, beneath the fear and the shaking, was an undeniable truth. He would fly again. And next time, he wouldn't be accidental. He would be deliberate. He would be ready. He would be dangerous.